Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our channel, True Courtroom Stories. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating piece of legal history. This is all based on some incredible research by Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir, and it's about a time when Islamic courts made a declaration that was, well, pretty earth-shattering, that even the most powerful ruler, the Caliph himself, could be wrong.
So let's start with a big question, one that every society has had to wrestle with for centuries. Is anyone, really, ever above the law? It's a question that gets to the very heart of what justice is. And the story we're looking at today, well, it gives us a powerful and, honestly, a pretty surprising answer from over 1,000 years ago.
To really get this story, we've got to jump back in time. We're heading to the 9th century Abbasid Caliphate. Now, this wasn't just some random period in history. It was a really complex, dynamic era that was basically the perfect setting for a major constitutional showdown.
On one hand, this time is famously known as the Golden Age of Islam. We're talking about mind-blowing breakthroughs in science, philosophy, and art. But, and this is what's so wild, at the exact same time, there was this intense political and legal tension simmering just beneath the surface. A huge debate was raging about a simple question: just how far does a ruler's power actually go?
And right into the middle of this high-stakes environment steps our main character, a man named Qadi Yahya ibn Aktham. As the Chief Justice of Baghdad, he was one of the most brilliant legal minds of his day, and, well, he was about to make some serious history.
You know, you can really understand who Qadi Yahya was by the principles he fought for. He was constantly pushing back against rulers who tried to meddle in the courts. He insisted on having really high standards for evidence. He worked to put limits on the state's power, and he was a fierce defender of the rights of everyday people. He was, to put it simply, a total champion for the rule of law.
Okay, so this brings us to the heart of our story. This is that moment when the abstract debate about power suddenly became very, very real. It was a direct clash, pitting the Caliph's authority against the Qadi's principles.
So it all started with this simple, direct order. A governor, acting on the Caliph's behalf, demanded an immediate arrest. This should have been a routine exercise of power, or so you would think.
And this was Qadi Yahya's incredible reply. He flat out refused, but it was how he refused that was so important. He said, "Present the evidence." He made it clear authority alone is not enough. He was basically building a firewall between the ruler's personal wishes and the legal process, even when that order came from the highest office in the entire land. You can imagine the governor was probably stunned. He clearly wasn't expecting this kind of pushback. So he decided to up the ante. He sent the order again, but this time he used the ultimate symbol of the Caliph's personal authority, the royal seal. This wasn't just an order anymore. This was a direct command from the ruler himself, sealed and verified. But Qadi Yahya, he didn't budge. His second refusal is even more powerful. Justice is not served by seals. Wow. With just that one line, he completely separated the symbols of power from the substance of actual justice. He laid out the only things that mattered in his courtroom: witnesses, proof, or a confession. Without those, the Caliph's fancy seal meant absolutely nothing.
As you can probably guess, an act of defiance like this couldn't just be ignored. The whole issue went straight to the Caliph. The stage was now set for the final showdown, where the Qadi had to justify his actions to the very ruler he had just disobeyed.
So when the Caliph asked him why he disobeyed, Qadi Yahya laid down his ultimate argument. He wasn't just talking about courtroom rules anymore. He was appealing to a higher law. He argued that obedience to God's law, to justice itself, is superior to obedience to any ruler on earth. He said the Caliph's commands were only valid if they followed that higher law.
Now, what Qadi Yahya did that day, we actually have a modern name for it. It's called judicial review. This is a foundational principle for so many modern legal systems, this idea that the courts can check the power of the government. And here it is, being clearly expressed centuries before it became a cornerstone of Western law. It's just incredible.
And this wasn't just some forgotten incident. This powerful idea that the law actually stands above the ruler, it created a legacy that has echoed through legal systems all over the world for centuries.
The journey of this principle is really something else. It starts right here with Qadi Yahya back in the 9th century. Then you flash forward 900 years to England, and you see a very similar idea pop up in a famous case that limited the government's power. And then,
Jump forward again to 1972 in Pakistan, where the Supreme Court used these same ideas to rule against illegal detentions. It's the same core principle, just showing up again and again throughout history.
And that brings us right back to where we started, but with the modern twist. See, Qadi Yahya's story isn't just a cool piece of history. It's a timeless lesson about that constant struggle between power and justice. It forces us to look at our own world and ask, when a ruler's command clashes with the law today, who has the courage to stand up and say, justice is not served by seals?
Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please subscribe to our
Any society. What happens when a person in power, a caliph, a king, you name it, gives an order that breaks the very laws they're supposed to protect? Who wins? Is it raw power or is it the rule of law? It's a battle that has been fought over for centuries. You know, the answer to that isn't some modern invention, not at all. It's actually rooted in principles that are incredibly old. To really get it, we've got to go back and look at a foundational moment, an ancient precedent that really set the stage for everything that followed. Okay, so imagine this scene. You have the caliph, pretty much the most powerful man in the entire land, and he orders an arrest. His word should be the end of it, right? But then you have this judge, Qadi Yahya ibn Aktham, who does something absolutely extraordinary. He refuses. He says, nope, not without evidence, not without due process. He's basically saying the ruler's command means nothing if it doesn't follow the law. He put the law above the ruler. It's an act of courage that just echoes through history. All right, now let's jump forward quite a bit, all the way to 1765 in England. A really similar drama is about to play out. Acting on orders from a government minister, the king's own messengers just smash their way into a man's house, a guy named John Entick. And what are they after? His private papers. It was a complete show of state power against one single person. But then the court gets involved, and what it said was honestly revolutionary. The judges made it perfectly clear. If an action isn't specifically allowed by the law, then the government is forbidden from doing it. Think about that. The government's power isn't infinite. It's limited to only what the law says it can do and absolutely nothing more. This one case, Entick versus Carrington, literally changed the world. It became the bedrock for rights that we often take for granted today, things like your right to privacy in your own home and real limits on the government's power to just search your stuff whenever it wants. It really helped build the foundation of modern freedom as we know it. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. Look at what happens when you put these two stories right next to each other. The parallels are just stunning. Qadi Yahya said no to an arrest without evidence. The English court said no to a search without a warrant. In both cases, the court put the ruler under the law. Both of them stood up for the individual against the massive power of the state. It's the exact same core principle, just separated by hundreds of years and totally different cultures. So you might be thinking, okay, that's interesting ancient history. But is it just history? No way. This very same principle showed up again, loud and clear, in a conflict from the 20th century. Let's go to 1972. Pakistan is under a military dictatorship run by General Yahya Khan, and under the excuse of martial law, citizens are being rounded up and detained illegally, the rights just tossed aside. So the nation's highest court has this terrifying choice to make. Do they just go along with the military ruler, or do they stand up for the Constitution? And in a moment of just breathtaking courage, the Supreme Court of Pakistan dropped a bombshell. They didn't just say the detentions were illegal. I mean, they did, but they went further. They called the military ruler exactly what he was, a usurper, someone who had illegally taken power. This was a direct public challenge to a dictator who was still in charge. The court's logic was just crystal clear. They said, look, no authority, not even a military general, is above the Constitution. No ruler can just lock people up without a legal reason. And, most importantly, the fundamental rights of a citizen will always, always be more important than what the person in charge wants. So let's do another one of these comparisons. And there it is again, that same echo of Qadi Yahya. You see it, right? Rejecting a ruler's illegal orders, demanding a real legal reason before you take away someone's freedom, insisting that the law is the ultimate boss. It doesn't matter if it's a caliph in the 9th century or a general in the 20th, that core principle of justice is timeless. And what's the common thread here? What ties all these incredible stories together? They are all just powerful, powerful examples of judges restoring dignity to the entire legal system by standing up and resisting executive abuse. They show how the courts can be that last line of defense for a country's soul. Okay, so let's tie this all together. What is the timeless truth we're talking about here? And maybe more importantly, why do these stories from so long ago matter to us right here, right now? Well, it really all boils down to this incredible line from Justice Hamid Rahman in that very case we talked about. No one, however powerful, can claim immunity from the law. That's it. That's the whole ballgame. It doesn't matter who you are, a king, a caliph, a general. The law applies to you, period. At the end of the day, this is what the law is for. It's a shield. It's meant to protect our most sacred things, our homes, our personal safety, our very dignity, from the whims of powerful rulers. It's the promise that we are citizens who have rights, not just subjects who have to follow orders. Which, of course, leaves us with a really big question for our own time. In a world where leaders are always trying to expand their power, how do we make sure our judges have the same courage as Qadi Yahya or the justices in Pakistan's Supreme Court? That's something we all need to think about. If you found this story as powerful as we did, please subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and please share it with your friends. Thank you so much. The epic struggle between a ruler's command and the rule of law. It's a story as old as time, really. 70. And it's a story we see told again and again. Okay, let's get right into it. At the very heart of any organized society, there's this constant, timeless tension. You know, on one hand, you've got the authority of the state, the power of a ruler. But on the other, you have the liberty of the individual, which is supposed to be protected by the law. And this brings us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? When a ruler who has an army at their back issues an order that completely violates the very laws they're supposed to uphold, I mean, who has the power, let alone the sheer courage, to stand in their way? Well, the answer, as it turns out, isn't found in armies or in massive revolutions. It's found in the quiet but profound authority of a courtroom. We're going to look at 3 absolutely incredible instances where a single judge, armed with nothing but the law, looked absolute power in the face and just said no. Our first story takes us way back, right to the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate, which was a global center of power and learning at the time. From there, we're going to jump forward almost 1,000 years to 18th century England, a time when the very foundations of modern constitutional law were being hammered out. And for our final stop, we land in 20th century Pakistan, a nation grappling with military rule and the fight for the supremacy of its constitution. Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting, because this is where you can see how these 3 epic legal battles all boil down to the same core principles. Just look at the parallels. In the Abbasid court, Judge Yahya ibn Aktham basically tells the caliph, you cannot arrest someone without evidence, period. Fast forward to England, the court tells the king's minister, you can't just search a person's home without a lawful warrant. And then, in Pakistan, the Supreme Court tells a military ruler, you cannot detain a citizen outside the clear boundaries of the Constitution. You see, different times, completely different legal systems, but the exact same courageous message. Your power has limits. So what's the big idea here? What connects all these dots? Well, these cases aren't just cool historical anecdotes. They represent the law's decisive, unwavering answer to the problem of unchecked power. This one idea, this is the legal bedrock that connects all 3 of these stories. It's the principle that the authority of the state isn't infinite. It is defined and it is limited by law. The second a ruler steps outside that boundary, they're not governing anymore. They're practicing tyranny. And the court's most fundamental job is to be the guardian of that boundary. But you might be wondering, okay, great stories. But did these moments of defiance actually change anything? Oh, absolutely. Their impact created a legacy of judicial courage that ended up shaping legal systems for centuries to come. Let's just break it down. Qadi Yahya's ruling wasn't just a single victory. It actually strengthened the entire concept of procedural justice in Islamic law. Then you've got the Endick v. Carrington case. I mean, this became a cornerstone of liberty in the Western world, directly influencing huge ideas like the Fourth Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. And finally, the Osman Gilani case in Pakistan was this monumental step that helped restore the credibility of the judiciary, asserting its role as the ultimate defender of the Constitution. And this really gets to the heart of it all. Laws written down on paper are pretty much meaningless without people who have the moral courage to enforce them, especially when it's hard, especially when it's dangerous. Liberty isn't something that's just given to us. It has to be actively defended in courtrooms. Which brings us to the final and maybe the most powerful moral of these stories, a real lesson about the true hierarchy of power. Sure, a ruler may command armies with all their might and all their force. But the judge, often just a single person, commands a force that is far more enduring, justice. And in a society that is truly governed by law, it is justice that ultimately commands the ruler. We want to give full credit where it's due. The research and the framework for this entire explainer comes from the incredible work of Mr. Zahir Ahmed Mir, a constitutional and corporate lawyer. And so we end where we began, but with a question that's not for the past, it's for right now and for the future. You see, this tension between power and law, it's not some relic of history. It's a constant, ongoing struggle. And it leaves us all to wonder, as this timeless conflict continues, who will have the courage to say no?